Don't worry about the language. Let's talk about it. Let's talk.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of Muzzy Buzz Live. And I know it's been a while since I put out a video. I've been kind of busy with some other things. I was traveling a little bit. I had some guests come over, and I was just kind of busy, and I was just getting adjusted with some other things. And obviously, we had Labor Day and things like that. So it was tough for me to go ahead and get live, and I do apologize for not putting out some new videos, but I apologize. So this is our live session. So I'm going to be, taking some questions and just talking about some things. And right now, essentially what we're doing is we're hey, wa alaikum assalam, Caliph, welcome to the show. So right now, I really wanted to talk about a couple things. First of all, there was UFC 242, which was a big deal. I know a lot of Muslims were out there watching 242, and it was a big deal. I mean, a lot of people were kind of worried about Khabib fighting Dustin Poirier, and that was a tough fight. There were a lot of other Muslim fighters. Our man out of Chicago, none other than Bilal, remember the name Muhammad. He fought out, represented himself really well, made a strong statement. First time fighting in Abu Dhabi or in the Middle East in general, and he had a blast. He felt like he was at home, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But you had other people like Zubaira, you had Islam fighting to Islam, Shamil, Marbek, and unfortunately two of the fighters, Shamil and Marbek, they didn't really get their win they wanted. Tough losses, but inshallah next time they get it, But it was a big show of Muslims that were out there. And I think it's pretty important because, for a long time, the UFC has been kind of, sleeping on those Dagestani fighters. And I think Khabib put them on the map. He said, hey, look, you know what? I want my team to be unbanned, and, I want them to have a chance on this card. And I think he's bringing a lot of light and a lot of deserved attention to that Caucasus regions, and throughout history, everybody's known the Caucasus people to be very strong and disciplined fighters and warriors. And so I think they're definitely going to make their mark on the UFC. But the main event was, Khabib and Dustin Poirier. I think that was a pretty amazing fight. Obviously, you had some other fights. You had Paul Felder, and you had him fighting over there against Barboza, and that was a really close fight. I'm not sure who I thought would have won that one. Even at the end of the fight, I wasn't really sure if it should have went to Felder, but I'm not a judge. But nonetheless, both are great fighters, and I think it could have gone either way, and so. Congratulations to them. But Khabib stole the night. I mean, he literally dominated. And I think you can tell. What's really important is outside, a lot of people have been talking about this. They've been saying, Khabib is a dominant fighter. He's great. You can't really touch him and things like that. But in reality, I think a lot of what Dustin was saying is an important lesson. Dustin got really emotional, and I don't fault him for getting emotional over this whole fight. The man trained his heart out. Like he said, he thought this was his moment, that he's been training and suffering defeat, and all that adversity to lead up to this point where he would take what he believed was his, which was the belt. And the man trained and trained and trained, and people saw him progress in his career and saw how he developed as a fighter, and they said, this guy is a real contender. So he's not a joke. He's not some small-time fighter. This is one of the best in the world, pound for pound, right? We're talking about some of the greatest fighters in the world that fight in the UFC, and to get to the level of being able to have a fight with Khabib is a big deal. So don't let anybody downplay that at all. But what is amazing is that despite all of what he did and what he trained for and how hard he trained and the motivation and the confidence and the conditioning, Khabib manhandled him. right? And I think that's really important to know because, you know, I mean, that shows you the level that Khabib is on. You know, I mean, he calculated what Dustin Poirier was going to do. He knew. Later on in the press conference, he talks about how, you know, I knew that he was going to go after my neck. And I know a lot of people are like, well, that's nonsense. How could he know that? You know, well, he's been studying the fighter. Not only that, remember what background Khabib comes from. He comes from a Sambo background. And in Sambo, you know, like they're known to, so to speak, give the neck. Like they're not afraid of giving the neck. And usually in jiu-jitsu and other forms of grappling, that's the worst thing you want to do is give your neck. And for them, they use it as a form of deception, like, you know, a kind of bait and switch, right? And so, you know, Khabib pretty much, when he got into that, when Poirier, put him in that guillotine, and that was a deep grip. I mean, that was a deep guillotine. I mean, most fighters who would have had that happen to them probably would have panicked and said, oh my God, what am I going to do here? But Khabib was really calm, and he took his time. Like right when he landed on the ground, you know, Khabib was smart enough to turn his body, his hip, in order to kind of free his neck and prevent, you know, Poirier from getting the full mount. And I believe if Poirier got the full mount, he probably would have, you know, submitted Khabib. I mean, that's, you know, it's not an easy grip to get out of it. There's a lot of pressure in that moment. But I think Khabib, his level of grappling and his understanding of his opponents is so high, like high level, that he was able to anticipate and be calm and not panic and be able to make the right moves in the right time, right? And so I think that is a testimony to his talent and his ability as a fighter. And I think that you know, that's unfortunate for Dustin Poirier, but it just goes to show you that Khabib is a fighter right now that is, you know, pretty much on par to be, you know, greatest of all time in the UFC. I mean, Dana White himself said, you know, there's a few more major fights that, you know, Khabib has to do. And when he does it, you know, it'll be safe to call him, you know, greatest of all time. Now, I mean, I'm not saying everybody has to sign to that label or that label for Khabib, but definitely he'll be a name to remember. He's definitely building his legacy, and we don't know who the greatest of all time is going to be. And I mean, you know, the sport changes. The sport is an evolving sport, and you know, we don't know what's exactly going to happen. But nonetheless, aside from that, I think Khabib was very humble, even in his victory. You know, he put on the guy's shirt and he said, you know what, we're going to go out and we're going to donate to this cause. And, you know, we're going to, you know, I respect him as a fighter, and, you know, he's a tough opponent. And even the advice he was giving afterwards during the press conference was very meaningful. It was important. You know, he was saying, you know what, it's not always about the money or the win, you know, this is whatever at the end of the day. You know, it's about being around, you know, being around good people and doing good for people and not being arrogant and staying humble. And he talks about that fire that he has in his belly, right? That fire that he has, like no matter how much money he has, how much fame he has, he wants to keep that fire alive in his belly, and he wants to fight the best of the best. He wants to continually challenge himself, right? And, you know, he was never did he for a moment forget that he had to thank his creator. When he won, he was full of praise. Alhamdulillah, you know, he was happy to praise his creator, and he recognized that none of this would have been possible without Allah, you know, without Allah giving him that victory. And I think that's important to know. The other thing is, I found very interesting was that so many of the Muslim fighters, they felt like they're at home. They were like, we felt like the home team, you know, like we didn't have to worry about the fans, and their family could come. And, you know, it was really nice to have that. And I can understand for anybody that's been in the Middle East, for anyone that's been to a Muslim country back home, you understand what that feels like. You feel like, you know, you're among your own people. You know, there's no weird or awkward looks. There's no uncomfortable situations. There's no explaining what you're doing. And, there's masajids everywhere and the adhan is being called and things like that, right? There are certain benefits of being around your own people and experiencing that, especially before a major event like a fight where you're tense. That kind of relaxes you, right? Bilal Muhammad was talking about that. I feel like I'm among my own people and that, I'm the home team here. And that's a really good feeling. And I think that, there's a lot of excitement and a lot of interest in MMA in the Middle East right now. It's been brewing for Abu Dhabi. I think they have like a 5-year plan for the next 5 years. They're going to be rolling out events and in coordination with the government and tourism and all that stuff. And it's good, I mean, a lot of people who would have probably never met Muslims came out there and actually got to interact with some Muslims, and they got to see a little bit of the Muslim lifestyle and the cultural aspect of it in part of the world if they had gone there. For example, if they would have done it in Russia or Australia or other places like that, they probably wouldn't have been able to. There will be more events, and I think people should stay tuned. There will be more and more Arab fighters and Middle Eastern fighters and Caucasus fighters, and I'm sure there'll be a lot more, and I think we should encourage that. So that's kind of what I had about the whole UFC 242 thing. There's going to be a lot of clips coming out, a lot of footage, and I'm sure. And speaking of footage, there's a guy named Will Harris. Wonderful documentary that he made. He has one called Anatomy of the Fighter, and he really follows around Khabib around from Dagestan all the way up until the fight week and things like that. And so it's amazing that he does that, and you can see all the wonderful footage. Check it out on YouTube if you have it. It's called Anatomy of a Fighter, and it goes into detail about a lot of these things. So check it out. I think you guys will enjoy that a lot. Okay, good. So that's what we talked about with Khabib, and now I want to talk about some other things that are happening this week. The hurricane that happened, a lot of devastation. People are collecting money for the Bahamians, and that's important. Unfortunately, some of their homes are completely destroyed. Over half of their homes are destroyed, and they're strangled without. I should say stranded without help, and they don't really have, many people to rely on. So if you can donate, I'm going to try to put a link in the box below in the comment or in the description box so you guys can donate to the Bahamians and, and find out, how you can help them. Another thing is, the situation in Kashmir is also escalating, and that's something that Muslims should also be concerned about. There are curfews put into place that are preventing Muslims from going out and for example even going to the masjid and things like that. So please pray for them as well too. Their situation is not good with Modi effectively revoking their autonomous status and then basically allowing for non-indigenous peoples to make their move on their land that was traditionally prohibited under the previous constitutional act that guaranteed that the property could not just be bought by anybody except for Kashmiris and people living in that region. So things of that nature, a very troubling situation. So, make sure you keep them in your dua and try to donate for them as much as you can. Another thing that's been kind of sparking some controversy is that we had or not me, I wasn't on the show, but the Mad Mamluks had a show with Shaykh Yusuf Rios. And, there was some talks about social activism, and that kind of led to the ideas of race and how do Muslims view that, and how do they respond to the climate today, the racial climate today, I should say, or the political climate around racism. And I think a lot of things were said that need to be qualified and need to be examined. I don't believe that what was said was 100% accurate. And I don't want to get into the details right now because I think we're going to be saving this for an episode. But I think there's a lot of problems with the critical race theory. There's a lot of blame on innocent people that shouldn't be there. And nobody, if we're standing for truth, if our objective is truth and justice, then we have to be careful with our words. We have to be careful with whom we're going to blame and with who we're going to put that burden on top of. Because it's a very uncomfortable feeling. And it's almost like a feeling of resentment when somebody you don't even know is putting or blaming you for something you have no control over, right? And then saying, well, you just don't get it, right? And so since you don't get it, you have no business talking about it, and your experiences don't matter. And I find that to be problematic. Oh, you know what? I think for some reason we've got some issue with the Canon here. So let me see. I don't know when that froze out for me. Sorry about that, guys. Okay, that should probably fix the issue. Let me see here. Okay, perfect. So I think it's kind of problematic, you know what I mean? And I think that we got to be careful. And, there's a lot that can be said. And I think that we have to be mindful about what we're saying, especially about other people, especially when those people may be your brothers and sisters. The last thing you want to do is force people away from the Jama'ah and force people out of Islam because you feel like or you've made them feel like they don't belong, or you made them feel like there's some kind of guilt behind that. Because one thing that Allah says, that at least in Islam that we believe in, is that when you say Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammad Rasulullah, your past sins are forgiven. And even before that, even the idea of inherited sin or bearing the sin of your fathers is not a concept that is common to us. It's alien to us, right? This is more of a Christian doctrine. We don't inherit the sins of our father. And this is what it begins to sound like, right? When you start blaming people for certain things and saying you're responsible for this, or you should have something to say about this, right? And so I think there's a lot of controversy around that. And I ask, and I'm not going to go into the details right now, but I ask the brothers and sisters to be mindful. Think with your mind and think logically. Don't think with your emotions. A lot of people will tell you, well, you can't separate emotions. I believe you can. I believe you can separate emotions from your judgment. Right? Emotions are part of being a human being. But when you're ready to make a verdict and you're ready to utter things from your mouth and your tongue about people, if you cannot control your emotions, then you shouldn't be saying these things. Because the Prophet ﷺ says, control that flesh between your lips and between your legs. If you can do that, you will be in Jannah. And oftentimes, many of us, we transgress that. We say more than we should about something. And that can be very dangerous for us. And we ask Allah Azza wa Jal to protect us from saying these types of things and our tongue being a witness against us on the day of Yawm al-Qiyamah. Allahumma ameen. But, and I think in light of that is why we need to have a discussion around this. And I think that Islam right now is being plagued with ideas that are from outside the boundaries of Islam. They're mixing in things and they're using Islam as a vehicle to unify people around ideas that may not necessarily be reflected within Islam. And we have to be very careful about that. But anyways, I'm going to keep this short. I didn't want to keep it too long. I wanted to have a short session. But inshallah, we're going to be coming out with a video on that topic later on. If you have any other topics you want me to talk about, something I missed throughout the week, something that's coming up, make sure you DM me or you message me on the Facebook page. Facebook is right there below me. The Twitter handle is right there below me. Make sure you tune in, subscribe, and hit the bell so that you're notified every time I release new content. I'm going to be trying to make things more regular. I still haven't been able to get a schedule yet, but I will be coming out with that shortly once I can confirm and commit to a particular schedule. But that information will be following very, very soon. So pay attention for that or be on the lookout for that. But like I said, if you have any other topics or anything that I'm missing, something that came up on Twitter or on YouTube or Facebook and that I wasn't able to address, make sure you get at me. The contacts are below. I'll be happy to engage you. I'll be happy to even elaborate more on certain topics and give you my opinions, even though they really mean nothing. But hey, some of you find that to be entertaining for some reason or another. So I'll be happy to do that for you guys. So that is all I have for this episode. Thank you for tuning in. This has been another edition of Muzzy Buzz, and we are out. So let's talk about it. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.
Muzzy Buzz, Muzzy Buzz, Muzzy Buzz, Muzzy Buzz, Muzzy Buzz.